Yo, what is up? I've gotten so fucking good at grabbing those links. Like so good. I send it live and then I know that I've got like 35 seconds. I got to go to YouTube, grab the link, copy and paste, send it in the Discord, go to Twitter, grab the link, put it in the Discord. I get all that shit done in like 28 seconds now. I'm so good at this. Anyway, enough of that. My name is James. I'm the owner of PaterDFS.com. I'm joined today by Mr. Pablo, who missed week one due to I don't know. I guess we can call it physically unable to perform list or whatever, right? Like he had other things that made it so that he could not be on the main slate talk, but has filled in. We did well. Last week was good. We nailed a lot of the things we talked through, and hopefully Pablo can keep that momentum going. Pablo, how are you doing today, bud?
I'm good, man. I'm happy to be back, and no boat trips today, and was able to think through the slate a bit. And I really enjoy this pod. I feel like we were able to just kind of go outside of this is the good play, this is a bad play, and think more micro macro strategy, game theory. And I don't think there's that many. I think there's more of these types of discussions needed in DFS. It's like the fun part of DFS is the part we're about to talk about.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that people ask me questions about is X, Y, or Z a good player? If I'm worried about a player from perspective, I'm just like, I don't fucking know, because I don't think that I just don't think it matters all that much. Like how I feel about any individual player or any individual play is completely within the context of the slate. Like if you were to ask me, how do I feel about AJ Brown? I don't know. He's a good receiver. Like I don't know. But like if you were to ask me, how do you feel about AJ Brown at his price tag in reference to the people around him? Like I'll have a better answer. Like Christian McCaffrey. Like how do I feel about Christian McCaffrey? I don't know. He's made of glass. How do I feel about Christian McCaffrey at 7,500 in a spot where there's no other legit offensive weapon? I love him. Right. That's a better way to answer that question. So I think that, this pod, we try to talk a lot more about the things that matter as to why you would actually consider someone. And if you're not considering somebody who everyone else is considering, why are we not really worried about that person, or what other things are we focusing on otherwise? Hess brought up a good point in the Discord. He worded it kind of badly because that's what he does. But he brought up a good point the other day of like, he likes Saquon Barkley over CMC. And it's like, okay, well, that statement in a vacuum sucks because that's silly in a vacuum, because people just look at it and just like, okay, well, based on projections, but whatever. But like when you consider that CMC is likely to be 30% owned and Saquon is likely to be 5% owned, and they have the same ceiling and they're around the same price, and like you can build the exact same lineup and then just slot in Saquon Barkley instead of CMC, like that's the reason why you like Saquon Barkley more than Christian McCaffrey in certain lineups. There's always that kind of nuance, and that's the kind of stuff that we try to tackle on this show specifically, especially when it's just me and Pablo.
Yep. So why don't we start by just talking about the general sort of macro slate, and then we can dive into some roster construction and then specifics around certain players. First of all, this is a big slate, right? We've got no buys yet, so it's a very big slate. It's a lot of games, and that means there's a lot of plays. There's a lot of options. It's not just a big slate, but it's also week 2, right? So we only have a 1-week sample, really. We obviously have all the off-season narratives, all the best ball bros, season-long people with their opinions who now, based off of 1 week in a very specific matchup in that specific week's games, have now decided that their entire offseason was wrong, or they're doubling down because one thing they thought was going to happen, it was obviously very right. So I know that this is not like a terribly sharp, unique take, but my feeling about week 2 is that week 1, nobody knows anything. Week 2, nobody still knows anything, but now week 2, people think they know something.
Right.
And I think it's important to think about that from individual player standpoints and team standpoints too. Where might the field be overweighting week 1 outcomes, and how do you take advantage of that, right? the second thing about this week, I would just say is that it is a very loosely priced slate. And it's loosely priced for one main reason, which is that there's a zillion receivers that are underpriced, and there's a bunch of running backs that are the running backs are much more condensed. We'll talk about them. There's like a group of like 5 or 6 running backs that ownership is going to funnel into, CMC being the biggest one by far. But there's a handful right after him as well that are slightly underpriced in good environments. But the other part of this is that while my first look was like, oh, there's no 3K receivers, there's one, but there's very few. It doesn't really matter because there's like a bunch of 4 to 5K receivers that normally are like mid 6s or even 7s. And so it's a big slate with very loose pricing, and I think there's a very clear cut chalk roster construction that you can either pivot off of entirely and then just be unique in that you're building your roster differently than that, or you can use that chalk roster construction with some alterations based on your field size. So I know I just said a lot, but my main points here are very big week, overreaction to week 1, and very loosely priced with a clear chalk build. So a question I would ask you, just macro concept wise, not even necessarily specific to this slate, is how do you think about building lineups that can win GPPs when it's a very loosely priced slate? When there's like a lot of options and you can fit, a variety of different builds with high upside plays. What do you think are just roster construction strategies, whether it's football or anything else, that can get you that sort of first percentile outcome that you want?
It's really hard to win slates like this. That's the first thing that I will say. I always say in during MLB season, right? Like, I'm not going to win slates where you have to score 220 points to win a slate. I'm not going to win slates where you have to score 250 points to win. NBA slates. I'm not going to win an NBA slate where you have to score 385 to win and like the cash line is 315. I'm just not going to win those. And the reason being is that the amount of options that you have to end up having scores that high, one, you have to have a lot of options, and two, you have to have good chalk. And we'll talk about the chalk here in a little while, but the chalk is pretty good from what I am seeing on the slate so far. So what that comes down to is like, it's this weird imbalance between you have good chalk, so you should be happy to eat it, but you can't eat very much of it because there are so many options and you have to have so much relative value to pass all of the other options. So you end up in this weird spot where you have to really like laser focus and prioritize specific pieces of chalk in specific orientations that make it so that you can end up passing the field more organically rather than trying to force it. And just one more like kind of expanded thing on that. I think that the way that you mostly do that is by eating chalk in unique ways, i.e. not in the same, like not with the same kind of roster construction that everybody else has. And we'll talk about roster construction here in a second and what it's likely to be this week. But I think that what you end up doing is just saying, okay, well, here is the typical boilerplate roster construction that you have. And then, here's all the chalk that you can put into it. How can I play this chalk in a way that is not the same way that other people are playing all of the chalk? And I think that's kind of the best way to attack these slates, because otherwise you introduce so much fucking volatility. It's so easy to just be like, oh, I'm going to have like an entire lineup of 4% owned players. And that's typically just not a very good idea, especially in NFL, but even in large field tournaments, like you don't want to win a GPP by like 28 fantasy points. Mm-hmm. It sounds sexy, but that's not what you want to do. You want to win a GPP by like 3 fantasy points, a couple fantasy points, right? Because that means that you were able to balance the wisdom of the crowd with relative value and leverage. And that's kind of where you end up in that sweet spot. So that's kind of the best way that I can talk about roster construction for such wide open slates.
Yeah. I would just add two more thoughts before we dive into the specifics on this slate, which is that we've talked a lot in the off season about sim-driven sort of optimal lineup builds, right? And I think we saw that in week one for sure. I think we're going to continue to see it. I think sims have made their way, generally speaking, to the crowd, and I think that's going to lead to very specific types of roster constructions. And um, the way I think about it is, you've got your cash equity and you've got your win equity. And when you've got good chalk, to your point, you don't want to sacrifice so much median projection sort of cash equity, so much so in the name of win equity that you're like totally, you're either first or last. You do want to give yourself a chance to win, but if the chalk is good, if you get two off the board, you're two boom or bust, right? And I think the way that I get around that a little bit is that, first of all, in the smaller field stuff I play, which is typically single entry or three max, smaller field, I'm willing to correlate or even hyper correlate more than the field will. And I think that the sims generally, they won't necessarily force those constructions unless a game has like a super high total with really cheap plays in it. So that in of itself, I think, can help differentiate you, is just correlating a little bit more, which I know sounds like very 101 to DFS, but people have gotten away from it a lot as you get to much more, just skinny or naked stack, with not even a bring back ever, because you're sacrificing too much.
Yeah.
The second thing I'm thinking about, which I think I've taken from people like you and Gordy and Tribe and others, is just ceiling. Like you do have to think about median, but you also have to ask yourself, for a player who's similarly priced, or you might sacrifice a little bit of median, can you get to a ceiling that's going to differentiate you, to get you to the top, right? And I still don't think that people talk enough about ceiling. And I think specifically to this slate, based on roster construction, there's some really easy and interesting ways to build that will get you to ceiling, if things go the right way, while also passing the crowd. So with that segue, let's just focus a little bit on roster build at first, and I think it starts with the quarterback. Okay, I don't know if you want to share range of outcomes, or I can do it either way.
Yeah, sure.
Do you want me to do it, or you want to share?
No, I got it. I already got it up.
Okay, so if you pull the quarterbacks
really quick, let's
Yes.
pull us back for a second, because we did have somebody who wanted to ask a trade question, and we also had a couple things here. So I'm trying to be better about managing comments.
Yep.
First off, Saquon, go fuck yourself, TJ. I don't know how to pronounce anything. Jameson's several pronunciations. Never forget it. Let's see. Trade question. Yeah, go ahead. Happy to answer them the best that I can. Right. I mean, I'm mostly a DFS guy. Pablo is only a DFS guy. I'm pretty sure he doesn't do home leagues even anymore. But I also work over at Fantasy Life, so I have their info rubbing off on me. So happy to answer.
Begrudgingly, I'm in 3 home leagues that I can't get out of because of my friends and family get too mad. I've tried to quit every year for the last 3 years, and they're like, "You're not allowed to quit."
Yeah, that's you're in prison.
Yeah.
Casual Playboy hoodie. Yeah, I fought card, as TJ says. This is actually one of my favorite hoodies. I wish I had more Playboy merch, actually. Playboy is an antiquated brand at this point. Like
vintage.
Kind of bad brand equity at this point, right? Like it is vintage at this point. I need to find that's a good point, actually. I need to find cool vintage Playboy shit. That's what I need to find. Like shirts and hoodies from like the 80s or some shit.
Some of us remember porn before you can get it on the internet. Some of us are that old. So respect Playboy magazines.
Some of us, our first car was a fucking Stegosaurus. Anyway, let's move on here to quarterback.
So let's look at quarterback. So I was a little bit surprised at first because my assumption when Purdy was ruled out, especially once I looked at the models, was like, oh, everyone's going to play Mac Jones at 4K. And then I was like, oh, James must have an ownership bug because he's not projecting his chalk. And then what I realized was, okay, this is what's going on. What's going on is everybody wants to play Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, or just go down a little bit to Josh Burrow. Jalen Hurts is interestingly not as owned as those other 2 guys, which is a discussion, independent of that.
Right.
And the reason people feel comfortable playing Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, is because we have a zillion cheap receivers, and we have a very chalk, well projected tight end in Fannin.
Yeah.
And so what people are saying is, why would I play Mac Jones at 4K when his floor is like nothing and his median is middling? When I can play slate breaker Jackson or Allen with chalk, value punt Fannin, and one of like 20 different receivers who are 4.5 to 5.5K. And the short answer is that it's complicated, right? That's it. The longer answer is that you have to do a trade-off on what you're getting out of Mac Jones in his price savings for what you can get by paying up at your receivers and running backs. I will just say that I think it is, you're auto differentiating. And I really do wonder if overnight and tomorrow morning, there's going to be enough touting on Jones that he's not going to come in this low. I still find it hard to believe. But like step one is if you just play Mac Jones with CMC or Pearsall instead of playing Lamar or Josh, like for smaller field, you're already pretty different, which is crazy. Yeah. It's crazy given his pricing and given the opponent. So it's just a very clear chalk build this week, which is it's one of those pay up quarterbacks. And then if we go to running back, you'll see it's CMC is the heavy chalk. And then you've got Connor, Kyron, Achane, maybe some Derrick Henry, Saquon, who's for some reason not that owned. And that's it. Like it's those 5 or 6 running backs with one of the pay up quarterbacks, Fannin at tight end, and then one of like 25 different value receivers. So I think the slate starts with, are you playing one of the pay up quarterbacks or are you playing Mac Jones? Right. And I'll stop there and see what you think.
So first off, yeah, legit rip to you. Kittle backers in season long just got fucking wrecked. So I want to frame this a little bit differently because I think that looking at Mac Jones as a quarterback on this slate is maybe a little bit misguided as to how you use him. I'm not looking at him as a quarterback. I'm looking at him as, what do I have in reference to Mac Jones against the other players that are in his price range? I'm almost looking at him like Taysom Hill. So if Taysom Hill, he's 4K, right? And you're comparing Taysom Hill against quarterbacks, tight ends, wide receivers, and running backs. You're actually comparing him as a flex option, right? Now, you can't play Mac Jones in the flex, but just stick with me here because I'm going to bear this out with some data here in a second. But if you think of him more as a flex option and compare him against other players in his price range rather than comparing him against quarterbacks, it becomes very clear as to the reason number one why you should be playing Mac Jones. So I'm going to go back to overall, and then I'm going to just show players who are 4,500 or less. And I mean, right away, you have a 3-point difference over Tyler Warren, who's the best projected tight end, right? You still have really low ownership. You have the best value metrics by far for anyone here. Like it's, if you sort by 4X, yeah, Harold Fannin is there, but Harold Fannin, I mean, he projects for low ownership, but he's going to get high ownership. Just for reference, on Saturday, I haven't introduced any of the sentiment stuff. So Sunday morning is when we get the sentiment stuff in. But Harold Fannin's going to be chalk. And everybody's like, oh, man, we got to play Harold Fannin for his 25% 4X rate. But Mac Jones at a 30% 4X rate, fuck that. We don't need to play him, So I think in reference to all of the other players in his price range, I mean, this is even more stark if you drop it down to actually 4K. Like you have like a 5-point difference. This is, you get a 33% jump on projection over any other player that costs as much or less than Mac Jones. So just from a projection and value standpoint, he just like speaks to that in and of itself. But then The thing that you're really asking yourself on this slate is not necessarily, do I think that Mac Jones is a really good value? Because very clearly, yes, he is. But what you have to do is you have to think about it of, if I have the option to play Mac Jones plus a high priced player, or a high priced player plus a value that is similar to Mac Jones, which one should I play? Which one should I prioritize? And we can measure that, right? So what I did is I wrote a program that lets me take in the range of outcomes and say, okay, show me combinations and sort them by salary efficiency, right? And show me combinations of a quarterback with a flex player, whereas the combined salary is between $10,000 and $15,000, and there is at least a $3,000 difference between the quarterback and the flex player. So this is that 2v2 of like, should I play Lamar Jackson plus Tyquan Thornton, or should I play Mac Jones plus Christian McCaffrey, right? Like, if you have that 2v2 scenario, what should you do? And when you look at the numbers here, I mean, Mac Jones, Mac Jones, Mac Jones, Mac Jones, Mac Jones, Mac. Like, he peppers the top of salary efficiency when it comes to this kind of exercise of saying, when you have the question on the slate of, should I play a stud quarterback and a cheap flex, or a cheap quarterback and an expensive flex? I mean, you can see here as well, we have Russell Wilson, we have Spencer Rattler. Like, as far as salary efficiency goes, it makes a lot more sense to say, I'm going to play a cheap quarterback with a stud. Namely, of course, these studs are Christian McCaffrey right now, but the point is bared out on that. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about the Mac Jones situation. Now, I will say, and then I'll let you get to it here in a sec, but I will say that SoCal in Discord did say, like, if you have the question of Josh Allen plus a cheap wide receiver, are you really choosing the Mac Jones plus Christian McCaffrey side? And the answer to that is yes, but the second standard deviation ceiling still probably belongs to the Josh Allen side, right? Like, that really high ceiling, I don't think Christian McCaffrey matches the ceiling of Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen at like really high end. But I think for the most part, the distributions are similar outside of that second standard deviation tail. So I think that there's reasons to play either side, but everything that I just said bears out that a lot of people should be considering this, and he projects for 4% ownership. So, like,
yeah, that's the point I was gonna. There's 2 points I want to make related to what you just said, and it also relates to a question Dicey just put in there, which was, do we really need to be paying 4K for a QB with all of the other positions that are discounted on the slate? And so here's 2 parts to that. First of all, ownership, right? Like, it's not just that he's discounted and that you can afford pay-ups because of him. He's also not owned. So if he was owned, well, then you're building similar lineups as the rest of the crowd, and then that means that the pay-ups are also going to be more owned, right? But what it means that he's not as owned is that by shifting the ownership off of a chalky pay-up quarterback and using Mac, you now have the money and the ownership and the leverage to use it at the flex positions. Okay. So the other question here is, while I do agree there's a lot of good value at wide receiver on this slate, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I mean, there's a lot. You've got Hollywood Brown, you've got Calvin Ridley, you've got Pearsall, there's a lot. AJ Brown, which is like, he looks like stupidly priced. The question is, if you can pay up for like a CMC and like a CeeDee Lamb or a Jamar Chase, will the ceiling on those guys, nobody's disagreeing that from a point per dollar standpoint, those value receivers are going to do well, or at least some combination of them are likely to do well, right? They're not all going to fail at their prices when it's so loosely priced. But are any of them going to nuke so hard compared to what a CeeDee Lamb or a Saquon or a Jamar Chase can do if they go completely bananas, that they're going to wipe out the benefit you get from playing Mac Jones, right? And that's where I think that's what makes me excited about Mac Jones. It's not that Mac Jones in of it himself is like just value. It's also that you can now build a different roster construction with several pay-ups that can take the top off of the field and get you there. And I think that's what makes me excited about him in conjunction with his ownership. So to me, it's not just Mac Jones plus the pay up, because it's also the relative ceiling you get because of that. And that's probably why your program is showing these outcomes, right? Because of what you can afford by using him. I think you're on mute.
Rip my life. So you end up in this position where with Lamar Jackson and all of these things, you basically lose out on one more stud if you play Lamar Jackson over Mac Jones. Like if you simply just go from Lamar Jackson down to Mac Jones, you have the salary to go up from like a mid-range player to a legit stud. It's the difference between Hollywood Brown and Puka Nacua. It's the difference between, whatever the fuck cheap or mid-range running back we have, or Saquon Barkley, right? You can literally go from a backup running back at 5K to Saquon Barkley in the flex if you drop down from Lamar Jackson to Mac Jones. Now, it's also worth saying that Mac Jones doesn't even suck, dude. This isn't like a Nathan Peterman is like Mac Jones could. I'm a little bit higher on Mac Jones, I think, than most people. But Mac Jones is like he can start for teams. He's a backup mostly because he had a bad run.
By the way, I'm by no means the ball knower guy at all, like especially for football. But there's also something to be said about Shanahan's offense being featuring McCaffrey at his price, where you're not unhappy to correlate Mac Jones and McCaffrey. Like McCaffrey might get 9 catches, right?
Yeah.
And he might score twice on receiving touchdowns.
Like there's no reason why you couldn't go Mac Jones, Christian McCaffrey, and Ricky Pearsall. And here's the thing. Mac Jones could absolutely match the output of Lamar Jackson. That is well within the range of outcomes of both these players. Like Mac Jones could have 23 fantasy points, Lamar Jackson could have 25, and nobody would blink an eye. And so that's the thing. When you're looking at these other 4K pieces, like that for all of the other 4K pieces to get there, it's a much longer leap than for Mac Jones to get 24, 25, 26 fantasy points. So I think that I just cannot believe, Gordy and I were talking about it, I cannot believe that he's not going to be like 20% out.
Yeah, and I can't either. I'm so much so that I feel like I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning and like ETR and Stochastic and whoever else is going to be touting him, and he's going to get up to like at least 10. But he should be significantly higher. Now, let's talk about a couple other things.
Really quick, I did just want to show before we move on. What do lineups without CMC look like? So I ran that without CMC because let's make the assumption that everybody played CMC. CMC is 100% tomorrow. Mac Jones was in about 50% of the lineups in terms of salary efficiency. He's now in 80% of them, it looks like. There's a couple Drake Mays, there's a Trevor Lawrence there, but like there's no elite quarterbacks whatsoever, and it's basically on Mac Jones. So we can move on from that, but I think that Mac Jones should be, his efficient ownership tomorrow is probably something like 25%, and he's not going to get there.
So I want to make 2 more points about quarterback. If we sort this by quarterback, you'll see that unless a more recent run than I looked at changed things, which I doubt, Lamar looks good. Josh Allen looks good. Hurts looks a little worse, but Hurts is going to be unowned, right, compared to those guys. The other thing that's interesting, and I've often not been the guy to advocate for this because just intuitively it did not make sense to me, but somebody asked a question in the chat that reminded me of it. Somebody said if Mac Jones gets there, he's going to have to bring other people with him, which is true, which is why we're fine using CMC or Pearsall with him. But here's the other thing that you can do with Mac Jones. We have one game that has a really high total on this slate that people are likely to target, which is Cincinnati-Jacksonville, right? And what you can do is you can play Mac Jones and you can just pretend you have Joe Burrow and you can play T. Higgins and Jamar Chase with him.
Yeah.
And you can, by the way, you can do that with CMC and you can even use Pearsall with that if you want.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make one more point related to correlation, which I think is like so incredibly obvious that I don't, it's like surprising to me that this guy's not projecting. And I know why he's not projecting debt owned. It's because of his price. But opposite of that, on a team in the Bengals, against a team in the Bengals that we've talked all offseason having a shitty defense, it's done nothing to fix their secondary. You can play fucking Brian Thomas Jr., who looks unowned compared to people like Calvin Ridley, right?
Yeah.
So I think one really easy way to play this slate for smaller field is you play Mac Jones with CMC, and you can throw Pearsall in there if you want. I don't think you have to. You play a double as if you were playing Burrow with Higgins and Chase, or Chase and Chase, the double Chase Brown also. You can because Chase Brown catches balls too.
Yeah.
With BTJ across them, you've got like over half your lineup done right there, right?
Yeah.
And I've never been a huge fan of playing the quarterback or playing two receivers without the quarterback. But in this case, Burrow's price is high enough where it just doesn't make sense to me to use. I'm okay using two of Burrow's pass catchers without Burrow. That's my point, because I think you can do that and still get Mac Jones with CMC and get kind of the best of both games, right? If that makes sense. And based on your reaction, it seems like you don't have a problem with that.
No, I almost am for sure going to have lineups that have like just these two and Mac Jones. And I have talked about this as well. This is a stand that I'm taking this year against the industry, I think. But I don't actually care about using quarterbacks and stacks this year. And that's going to be a hot take for a while. But the way that I built out the portfolio manager logic is to say that if there are players from a team, consider them the stack, not just who the quarterback is. So in this example, right, where you have Mac Jones as the quarterback, and then you have Chase Brown, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, your stack is a Cincinnati stack. It's not Mac Jones. If it's just Mac Jones plus Christian McCaffrey, that's not a San Francisco stack. That's a Cincinnati stack. Because the team that you are much more reliant on is Cincinnati than San Francisco, right? So the way that I look at it is, if you want to stack however many players from whatever team or whatever game environment, right? Like go Cincinnati with Brian Thomas Jr. on the other side. Fuck it. Do an overstack. Do a full Cincinnati Jacksonville overstack with 4 players from that game plus Mac Jones and Christian McCaffrey. Like that's fine. I think that's fine because that game has a really good game environment. And like the players are underpriced. I mean, T. Higgins at 6,100, I think people are going to look at it and say that's a steal later on in the season. Jamar Chase is appropriately priced, but like the Jacksonville guys are not. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's totally fine to just be like, build a stack and then just say, fuck this quarterback and insert Mac Jones and then see what else you can upgrade. And you can almost for sure get from a player that you were not stoked on playing to a player that you really want to play. And I think that's fine. And these are all just reasons. Mac Jones should legit be like 25, 30% owned tomorrow if people are going to play this slate right. But they won't. Yeah. So what? Like I just it's slates like these that make it so that my bankroll management sucks. Like I'm gonna
because it just feels like so much of an opportunity. Yeah. The other thing you said at the beginning, which somebody just asked a question, which I think directly relates to a point you made at the beginning, unless I misunderstood you, which I don't think I did. Was somebody said, do you guys have an issue with the QB RB tight end stack for Burrow instead of playing either of Higgins / Chase? And you said something at the beginning which speaks to this, which is be willing to use good game environments and chalk creatively. And so the short answer is no, I don't have a problem with that. This is kind of an extension for baseball. And baseball, people like Mike, who, shout out Mike, who had like 15 seats to this year's live final on DK. Yeah. Part of what Mike does really well is he doesn't get anchored on being overly certain that a certain part of a game is what's going to take a game to the next level. In baseball, he's willing to play like the 7 or 8 batter as part of a stack rather than having to play, 1, 3, 5, 6, 7 or whatever, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so if you think a game like Cincinnati Jacksonville is going to get nutty, right? Think of every play in it as having a fairly decent standard deviation around it. And if the game goes off, I think I've always thought about it to myself. It's arrogant to think that you know exactly how that game goes off, right?
Yeah.
There's a way. There's situations where Higgins and Chase go off. There's other ones where it's Chase goes nuclear, and on the other side it's BTJ and Hunter. I think everybody needs to be a little more flexible when they're trying to build GPP lineups that are going to win. And this is what's different in the Sims, and this is what's different than opto building. And it's sort of saying to yourself, I believe in this game. I believe that this game is going to go crazy, right? Similar to Atlanta, Tampa Bay last week. The teams that did well last week were players who had that game. And a lot of people had Bijan when everybody was using Drake London in that game, right? Which was also double. It was kind of a double whammy because you got leverage off of London when Bijan went off. Of course, London got hurt, but that's fucking what happens in football. Players get hurt and a different player goes off, right? So I think in regard to that game specifically, Cincinnati Jacksonville, I'm very bullish on that game, and I'm willing to use it in a wide variety of ways. Like, to me, it's any combination of Higgins, Chase, Brown, and on the other side, Hunter. I love BTJ, and I can't believe BTJ is not more owned. I can, because it's a pricing issue and a roster construction that it's too different when you use him than what the chalk build is. And the other play I'll just mention that game while we're on it, which nobody seems to have caught on. And it's like, this guy's like not by any means, like a Brock Bowers or anything, but Strange on the Jacksonville side, he's like a featured receiver for them this year. They let go of Evan Ingram, and they talked all offseason about him being a focal point of the offense, and he got like 8 targets last week.
Yeah.
And tight end is actually really, really condensed this week around either McBride or as a pay up or Fannin as the value. That if you just play, Strange, like that in of itself is, again, a different way to differentiate. You're just not playing Fannin or McBride in a game that you think is going to go nuts. So I would just say, don't be afraid to correlate around a game that you think is going to really go crazy, and just game stack it with some good chalk pieces around it. That's also a very viable strategy.
Yeah. I built out that lineup that you were talking about here on screen. And this is a fucking banger, dude. And this is Christian McCaffrey, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Brian Thomas Jr., Harold Fannin, and Hollywood Brown for ownership. And then the Ravens defense, like, you could even come down from the most expensive defense on the slate if you wanted to, and get up from Trayvon Henderson, who is like still a fine play at 5,500. But you could not do this with Joe Burrow, right? Like, with Joe Burrow, you can't. This lineup, this kind of lineup just doesn't work. You can't play Brian Thomas Jr. You can't play Hollywood Brown. You can't play Trayvon Henderson. You just can't make this work.
Yeah.
With Joe Burrow.
Yeah, and part of the reason this week that you can't make it work, to be clear, there's 2 parts to it. One is that the main reason is that the only really good sub 4K player is Fannin. Like, we've got the other guy, it's got a weird name, I don't remember him. He's a rookie that we like, that projects well, which is like a super fragile projection, right? And so that's the reason it doesn't really work. And it's that combined with the fact that you also have Hollywood Brown, Calvin Ridley, Olave, all the AJ Brown, like all these guys between 4.5 to 6K that have people just going up to Allen and Lamar instead of using Mac Jones. So I feel like this whole thing has been focused on Mac Jones, but it's really not about Mac Jones. It's about the fact that we're talking about how you build around good environments and good players, but you don't just copy what the field is doing in terms of roster construction.
Yeah. I'm going to need somebody to explain to me why everybody is asking me why we would want to play my Hollywood Brown over Juju Smith-Schuster. Because Marquise Brown had 40% of the targets.
Yeah.
I mean, Juju is a washed TikTok star. Like, he didn't have any play action targets, 14% of the targets, 13% targets per route run. His ADOT was 5.8, which is whatever in terms of ADOT, but like only 11% of the air yards.
Yeah, Hollywood Brown is crazy value for this week, given his role, like with Worthy out. He's crazy value.
Like, if you want to go with Juju, I think that's fine. Sure, that's fine. I think he had 5 targets last week or something. Like, that's fine. But again, like at 5,200 for Marquise Brown, who I think was mid 6Ks before his shoulder popped out of place, in a role where he should get force-fed targets at a low ADOT role, right? Like he's a PPR monster right now in the role that he's going to be in. Because I mean, Juju's not going to be the only slot guy. Like they showed last week that they're fine with giving Marquise Brown low ADOT targets. At 5,200, like I'm fine with playing him. I don't have a problem with that. So
while we're on the receiver thing, let's stay on receivers and let's just I've mentioned it a few times. We can go back to running back in a minute.
Sure.
Let's just sort the receivers just to show what I'm talking about in terms of how many values there are at receiver. Because I think it's a unique week, and again, in that it's a big slate, but it's not just a big slate, it's a big loosely priced slate. There's a zillion receivers between, like low fives to mid upper sixes. And if we just look at the 2x, 3x, 4x, I mean, and just go down this list, right? For let's ignore the top for a minute. Sort by median again, just for fun. So let's ignore the like Puka, CD, and Jamar Chase, who are kind of like the three pay ups. And if you look at this 2x, 3x, 4x, just going down this list, the ones who stand out: AJ Brown, BTJ, Hollywood Brown looks crazy. McMillan, the rookie on Carolina, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle doesn't look bad. T. Higgins, Calvin Ridley, Travis Hunter, Ricky Pearsall. If you keep going down, we'll see Calvin. We already did Calvin Ridley, right? And so there's so many receivers. Chris Olave, right? That it gives people the feeling that, and I made this note to myself as I was kind of building lineups today, which is people don't, the trade-off to pay up for Puka or for, and you, by the way, you don't even have to get up to Puka. You can play AJ Brown if you want, who's wildly underpriced in that game.
Yeah, 6,600 for AJ Brown.
Yeah, AJ Brown, it just is that something that people don't really want to do is, if we go back to now running back, because these two things are related to each other, the point I'm trying to make. Running back is way tighter. Like running back, we have CMC, who looks heavy chalk, right? And then we have essentially Achane, Kyren, Connor, Henry. You have you change it. Before you had Diggs, not Diggs. You had fuck is wrong with me? What's his face? Gibbs. I'm like dyslexic now. Gibbs projecting is a little more owned than I thought he would be, and that's come down now in your more recent run. But you've got like basically CMC's heavy chalk, and then you've got this tier of Achane, Chase Brown, Kyren Williams, James Conner, who are owned, and then you've got Saquon, who is a standout play, right, at his price. But what people kind of feel uncomfortable doing is I think people are overly comfortable in that cheaper. I'm not saying AJ Brown isn't underpriced. I'm talking about like Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about Hollywood Brown, who has like a completely crazy role now that Worthy's out at his price, right? But what people don't really want to do, and this is where I think this is like one of the keys that unlocks this slate, is if you go down with to Mac Jones, you can get up to Saquon, or you can get up to Jamar Chase with CMC and with Achane. And you, again, it's that nuclear ceiling. It's you're on a point per dollar standpoint, you're probably not better off. That was a point you were making before. You might be sacrificing a little bit from a point per dollar, but from a ceiling standpoint, that's where you make up the difference between Josh Allen and Mac Jones, right? You make up the difference if Chase catches 2 touchdowns and goes for 170 yards against New Orleans. Like Calvin Ridley's not doing that, right? He even if he hits a great value, he's never going to do that. He may get 70 yards and a touchdown, right?
Right.
So that's what I think makes this slate kind of fun, but also sort of challenging. We've got so much value and the pricing is so loose. To your point at the very beginning, it feels like you need the absolute fucking nuts to win.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a lot of the correlation comes in. I think you are going to need a high score to win the slate, because it's very unlikely that all these value pieces are all going to fail. But I think if you correlate and you get creative around the good game environments, and you also get a little bit creative around your roster construction, where you don't just do the pay up quarterback, one of those 6 main running backs, one of the value receivers, and then Fannin or McBride, just don't build that lineup a little bit, right? Or use that lineup and do the NBA approach that Tribe talks about, which is take like 3 positions and fuck around with them, so you're kind of working off the cash build.
Yep.
It's kind of like an easy slate to pivot off the chalk because the chalk build seems so obvious.
Yeah, the chalk build is super obvious, and one of the things that we can kind of exemplify here is, again, if we're talking about that situation where you're like, oh well, I could play a stud quarterback or I could play Mac Jones. Again, the $3,000 difference that you get going from Lamar Jackson to Mac Jones is at running back the difference between playing Tyrone Tracy Jr. and playing Derek fucking Henry. I mean, like you put yourself. It's the difference between, if you don't want to play Marquise Brown, between playing Marquise Brown and Jamar Chase. Like you get such a massive ceiling jump there. And yes, the ceiling for Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen is at least a standard deviation higher than that is for Mac Jones. But the median expectation, I think, crosses over much more than people are happy to admit. And the median distribution for Tyrone Tracy and Derrick Henry does not. Like that's not even, that's a massive difference. Or even Saquon Barkley, right? If you have Tyrone Tracy projected at 13 and you have Saquon Barkley projected at 20, the single standard deviation, like overlap between those guys, is like 10% of the time at 16 fantasy points or some shit, right? Like it's just not that close. So you end up with just so much room to upgrade from one of these mid-range guys to a stud that it's going to be so hard not to have a whole bunch of them.
I want to make a couple game specific points and then player specific points. So first of all, at running back, we talked about it at the beginning, but in case anybody didn't get this, I think for small field, you're not overthinking CMC. Like if you look at our range of outcomes on him and in that game, this is like irrespective of Mac Jones. Yeah. Like he projects too well, and I don't think he's a lock, but he's close to a lock for small field. I do think after him, I think Derrick Henry, based on our projections, and I kind of agree with this, looks a bit overpriced. There is something nice about Derrick Henry if you're not playing Lamar, which is if you think that Baltimore trounces Cleveland, you do get some leverage off of Lamar by playing Derrick Henry, right? And if you play Mac Jones, you get some salary savings where that is something you can do if you want, right? I have a hard time when I look at his range compared to Achane, Barkley, Chase Brown, Gibbs, Kyren, James Conner, not using 3 of those guys or 2 of those guys instead of Derrick Henry. But I get it from the standpoint of leverage off of Lamar. I also think one of the week 1 questions that I have as a fan, but more importantly for my money and for your money, is like the question around Miami, right? So I think there's a very decent chance, and this is like probably the square take. Like everybody thinks Miami is probably trash, including me, right? I think that they've got a really bad defense. They've got bad mojo. A lot of Tyreek Hill has been a poorly kept secret. He's miserable and he wants off the team. And he like quit at the end of the season. They were forced to trade Jalen Ramsey. And then they go out and get fucking throttled by the Colts, right? Who people thought might be the worst team in the league. So I think it's possible that Miami is just that bad, right? And if that's true, I think you're considering Henderson. Because he by the way, that's a good example, right? All offseason, the best ball bros and everybody was fucking obsessed with Henderson. And in the preseason, he takes that kick return back all the way and people go nuts. Also, some of the more casual sort of touts, like the non-DFS touts, like Bill Simmons, we're going crazy about Henderson. I think that for larger fields, that influences sentiment a little more than people realize. So I think if you think Miami's really that bad, I think you should consider using Henderson. The other possibility is that Miami's just sucked for 1 game, right? And people are totally overreacting. Achane doesn't look low owned, but he's probably not going to be as owned as he should on a team. He's got like an amazing roll in, and he projects as one of our best running backs easily. The other thing I'll point out, and this is probably a little more ball-knowery than I'd like to admit, is that the one thing Miami has that I don't think even people that hate the team think is bad is their D line. That's like the only good thing they have. They have Zach Sealer, they have Chubb, they have the kid who got hurt last year who's back, the defensive end. They've got Chop Robinson, who people are super high on as like a pass rushing end / linebacker. And people are like wanting to play Drake May this slate. I think there's a decent chance. And by the way, Vegas does not agree with the sentiment. Vegas has Miami as like winning this game. So it's my first segue to what are the week 1 overreactions we could take advantage of. And I feel like you can go one of two ways. You can say, I believe Miami sucks and you should consider playing Henderson in a game they just trounced Miami. Or you can be like, I think they just had a bad game, whatever. And by the way, the Patriots are not very good themselves. They've got a bad offensive line and their defense is not considered to be super strong. They're missing their standout corner. And I'm not advocating playing Tua's at all, but I think Waddle and Hill, this is like your one chance to play them if they go nuts at no ownership.
Yeah, you'll get them at nothing. Right. Everyone thinks that Miami is completely fucking washed. Everyone thinks it. And Tyreek Hill is $6,400 and AJ Brown is $6,600. Yeah. That price is fucking bad. Like of everything that I didn't even, because I never look at the slate before we like do this show.
Yeah.
I did not even know that AJ Brown was $6,600. That's like $2,000 underpriced as to what AJ Brown can be.
It's crazy.
But in regards to Miami, like this is probably, they're probably appropriately priced, is what I will say. I don't think that you get a massive value on anyone on this team outside of Tua. Tua should probably be $6K. He's 5,300. You get a little bit of value there. But Jalen Waddle, max maybe $6K that I would pay for him. Tyreek Hill, max probably 7,500. But there's the caveat that he might actually just suck. Devon Achane, whatever the fuck his name is, I don't care.
Achane.
Yeah.
I'm honestly, for all of what I just said, my very middling take on this is that like I'm fine playing Devon Achane. Like I play too small a field to want to play the Miami pass catchers. That's like not a hill I'm willing to die on. But I do think that using Henderson and being scared to use Achane because Miami is terrible is not, that I feel better about the Achane side. And I also think I don't care about defense, but I think that, if you want a cheap defense, you should consider Miami because I think that the Patriots offensive line is trash. And I think that that's the only good thing Miami has is D-line. But let's talk about the other overreactions to week 1. One of them, I think, is also that the Lions are trash now. That, they lost, obviously, their coach who went to the Bears. They went out and did not look good on primetime opening night against the Packers. And I think that there's a decent chance that they just had a bad game, right? Laporta, I think, is a really, really nice pivot off of McBride and off of Fannin at a tight end. So much of the ownership at tight end is going to be on McBride and Fannin that I think Laporta in this game is just really, really strong at his price. I mean, that's a really nice price for him. I think Gibbs is fine too. I don't know if I would prioritize him over Achane, Connor, Kyron, for sure not over CMC, which to me again is kind of near lock. But I do think that there is a little bit of people kind of the sky is falling in Detroit now because they lost all their coaches. It's possible, but I think it's more likely that they just had a bad game than they're just like a shitty team now.
Yeah, I think that they'll be fine. Really quick, I did also want to. This is exactly how I feel about AJ Brown. Like if AJ Brown like one bad game and he gets chopped $1,700 off his price, it's insane. Let's see. It's my first year really going crazy with weekly DFS. Any tips or strategies? Man, there's so much. Join the Discord. join the Discord and soak up and take place in the conversation. We talk all day, pretty much every day, about DFS stuff. So, but like one tip is just, don't think that you're smarter than everyone else. That's my main tip first. Miami being good would be a good May play. And then, yeah, Mike, this point is also important. The Packers defense looks really good. And that game was the first game of the year and with Goff outdoors. Whereas, we know that Goff plays better indoors. We know that he plays better at home. And the Chicago defense did not look especially strong against a rookie quarterback in the Vikings in that start. Like, they looked fine, but against Goff and against a better offense, that I think can kind of break them apart. I agree that I'm not willing to buy that they're bad. I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown is a really good wide receiver. I think that Sam Laporta is really, like, this is a good roster. This is another one where, like, I think that it's important to have slight context. They are priced appropriately, that you are not getting any discounts here at all. You're not getting a discount on Laporta. You're not getting a discount on Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're definitely not getting a discount on Gibbs. Maybe you're getting a discount on Jameson Williams at most, but I don't think you're getting any discounts here. So this is very purely, I think that they are better than, they had week one. I think that they are not going to suck this year. And I think that that would be the right assumption to make, because to your point, in week two, people think that they know everything off of 1 week, but they still probably don't know anything.
So here's one that I think ownership suggests people are not off their whole offseason take, but not as sure as they were, because their ownership would be much higher, which is Cincinnati. So everybody wanted to play Cincinnati stacks last week, right? And Cincinnati did not win anybody any money last week. They did not do well against the Browns. I heard a good take. I don't remember which pod I was listening to, but one of the ball knowers I was listening to was saying, look, it just wasn't a great matchup. Like, fucking, what's his face, their defensive end on the Browns is Myles Garrett is unbelievable, right? And he in the Bengals offensive line is not particularly strong. It just wasn't a good matchup. And it was also week one. Like, shit happens in week one. I am willing to double down this week on again, my preferred way to do it is just with Mac Jones instead of Burrow, although I'll probably have some Burrow teams as well. But I think that if they had gone crazy week one, we'd be seeing way higher ownership on this game. Some of it is just because it's a big slate, but some of it is that they didn't do well week one. And I think that in this environment against Jacksonville, who's not considered to be a good defense, I think Cincinnati is still relatively there's leverage on Cincinnati ownership that can be had. I do think you should be creative and thoughtful about the way you combine these pieces, which we've said a few times now, instead of, just don't be overly focused on just, you have to play Higgins Chase. You can play Chase Brown and Jamar Chase. You can play Higgins and Chase Brown if you want. But and same thing across them on the opposite side, because I do think this game has a chance to get there, like the Atlanta Tampa Bay game did last week. But I do think that their ownership suggests that the field is a little bit disappointed by what happened week one, and I'm willing to double down on Cincinnati this week.
Yeah, I'm fine with Cincinnati stacks. They look like, when you go and look in the stacks range of outcomes as well, like they're right there, man. But they are expensive as well. If you play Joe Burrow. If you don't play Joe Burrow and you take $2,600 down, then they cost as much as a Detroit stack or a Buffalo stack with Josh Allen, Shakir, and Keon Coleman. Speaking of Keon Coleman, really quick, that boy's role was fucking sick in week one. This is what I wanted to pull up after you get through your week one overreactions, because I think that it would be worthwhile looking at the expected fantasy point output from players over week one and week two. So do you have any more for your overreaction?
This is my last one. And I think there's both a main slate and then there's a late slate take related to this one.
Sure.
Which is that outside of Cincinnati, Jacksonville, a lot of the games with high totals are games where one team is expected to kill the other team. Like Baltimore is expected to kill Cleveland, right? There's one game that isn't garnering a ton of ownership that you can play either main slate or late slate in a variety of ways, which is Philadelphia, Kansas City. So I don't feel strong. I don't feel convicted enough around Mahomes right now based on last year and based on how bad they looked against the Chargers to do this for main slate. But I think for late slate, like if you're not considering a Mahomes double, you're missing the picture a little bit because that target tree is going to be so fucking condensed now with Worthy out. It's going to be, yes, washed and old, about to get married to Taylor Swift, Travis, right? But it's him and fucking Hollywood Brown. Like, I guess Juju might catch a couple passes, right? But like those are the pass catchers on that team now. And then across that, you have Hurts, you have a wildly underpriced AJ Brown. You have Devontae Smith, who's good. You have Saquon, who's fucking unbelievable, right? I think this is the game that has two teams with good totals, with good offenses, with good condensed target trees. By the way, Goddard's out too for Philadelphia, so that makes it even more condensed for Philadelphia. That I think it's kind of like the sneaky game. Like I don't think Cincinnati's sneaky. I don't think Baltimore playing Lamar or Josh Allen is sneaky. And I don't even think Mac Jones is that sneaky. Like I think people are just scared to play him because people think he sucks, and people are scared to not play Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, or Lamar. But I do think people are kind of overlooking this game outside of just saying I'm going to play AJ Brown or I'm going to try to figure out how to play Saquon. And I think if you correlate around this game, I think there's enough value in the other spots that you can get pretty different by playing Jalen Hurts. Or by, if you want to, playing Mahomes for larger field main, or just play him in late slate.
I should not be able to do this stack with AJ Brown and Hollywood Brown for like the Brown on Brown, the Brown squared stack for less than 12K is fucked up. Like I shouldn't be able to do that. This game, this is a Super Bowl rematch. First off, it's two good offenses. It is two condensed target trees. And it's not even that expensive, man. Like, look at these prices. The one expensive player is Saquon Barkley. Jalen Hurts is less than $7,000. Patrick Mahomes is less than Joe Burrow. I mean, I understand that, like, he hasn't been a fantasy stud by any means, but, like, this pricing is fucking drunk. Like, this is bad pricing.
Yeah. And this is where I think you say, you know what? Like, I will play Jalen Hurts with AJ Brown, and I will play Hollywood as chalk Hollywood. And I will even play like Olave or Calvin Ridley or Harold Fannin, right? Because you're going to need some savings if you're paying up for some of these guys instead of Mac Jones. Yeah. But this is where you play like the pay-ups with some of the chalky value everyone's playing. You don't do it with Lamar. You don't do it with Josh Allen. You do it with this fucking game. Like you game stack this game and you fit in the chalk value pieces with it. To me, that's like one really interesting way to play this slate differently at lower ownership. And so the only reason I thought about in terms of overreaction is just because the overreaction to week one is like, you know, the Chiefs died last year. They got lucky to make it to the Super Bowl. And week one against the Chargers was evidence that they're now officially dead. Like they're getting replaced by Denver. They're getting replaced by the Chargers, right? And like, I think it's at least equally true that that's not true. Like there's a very good chance that Mahomes goes out there and fucking throws 3 touchdowns to some combination of Kelsey and Hollywood Brown, right? And then you've got fucking AJ Brown for nothing across him. So I think it's a good overreaction to take advantage of is this is the only other game besides Cincy Jacksonville that has two teams that are good with condensed target trees that are both high totals. Every other game has like a lopsided total where one of the teams is supposed to just kill the other team.
Yeah, it's a like that. This game I think is one of those like if this were week 14 and both these teams are like playoff bound, right? And like they have had regular seasons. If this happened last year in week 14, this game would be mega chalk. Like giga chalk. Like everybody in this game would be like 20% owned or something.
Yeah. And there's one more point related to this game before I'm done with it. There's one more point, which is it's a late game. So you have late swap equity here, right? You can play some of the chalk early, and if it goes off, just stay with this game. And or you can play some leverage early, and if you have enough, if you're ahead enough, you can get a little chalkier with this game. Like you say,
Yeah.
do I really need to overstack this game? Do I want to squeeze in some later chalk pieces, instead of just going too ham on this specific game? So that's one of the nice like little bonus pieces about this game that you get with it.
Yeah, this is just a good game to focus on. Mike just asked a question. I get that he had 12 targets, but why are we going nuts on TOT?
This is Fannin. This is about Fannin, right?
Yeah, because people love to overreact to week one performances. Speaking of week one performances, so in the research sheets, we can go over into the season-long research, and we can take a look at the expected fantasy point output for the players in the league. Hey, it's my child. Hello. Good night. I love you. Night, baby.
I'm gonna ask you one question.
What's the one question, baby?
So, this rock. Come on.
Let's go.
That's fine. Go.
Oh, that was funny. Oh man, what a kid.
Man, it's fun. It's fun, but I do not miss those days as much as it's fun. I'm telling you, it gets so much easier when the kids are not young anymore.
That was so fucking funny. Yeah, look, Harold Fannin did really well. His expected fantasy points was 14. He scored 13. Like, that's a really good score. But to Mike's point, he only had 65% route participation. That is not incredible. For instance, Tyler Warren, as a rookie, had 73% route participation. 22% of the targets is good. But the ADOT is really low, 6.3 as well. Like 25% of the air yards is not incredible. I mean, his role was fine, but should we really expect another 12 targets for the tight end 2 on the Browns? I don't know, probably not.
And I think I'm glad Mike brought this up, because I think one of the interesting ways to get different about your roster this week is that we've said it a few times, but there's going to be 2 tight ends who garner most of the ownership. It's McBride and Fannin.
Yeah.
And I think, first of all, about both those guys, I have a very hard time. If you don't have to do it, you can if you want. McBride, I did this earlier when I was looking. I sorted all the flex positions, including tight end. Very hard for me to play McBride. Very hard for me to play McBride at his price when you can play Hollywood Brown, when you can play AJ Brown. I can't justify a tight end at 6K or whatever McBride is when you have players around him with better 2x, 3x in ceiling. So I think that if you can convince yourself you don't have to play McBride or Fannin, there's a number of really good low-owned pivot plays at tight end. There always are, because tight end is so it's so fragile to begin with. And then you also have a lot of underpricing. You have, Mike just mentioned 2 of the guys I was going to mention. You have Juwan Johnson in the New Orleans game. You can play that across CMC. You have Travis Kelce, if you believe in my Philadelphia Eagles Chiefs game going off take. You have Laporta if you want to play a Lions team that's not, that's people are selling on. You have Chig, who I know fucking Gordy loves for some reason, but he's cheap. You have Warren, who does look like Brock Bowers. Admittedly, that game doesn't look great for them. They're playing against the Broncos, and the Broncos are a good fucking defense. But he's super underpriced, Warren. And then you have Strange, again, in that Cincinnati game. So I think one of the things people need to, it's hard because you look at Fannin's value and you look at McBride and you're like, oh, like, how do I not play these guys? But I think there's a number of really good pivots at tight end.
I fucking love the Juwan Johnson call, especially because I'm so into Mac Jones. Juwan Johnson. So in reference to Harold Fannin had 65% route participation. Juwan Johnson had 96% route participation. He had a 5% higher target share. His targets per route run was a bit less, but that's only because he played basically the entire game. He had a higher ADOT. He had more air yards. He had a higher expected fantasy points. His PPR output was a little bit better. And yet, he's not going to be the one that people are super into for some reason. Like, Harold Fannin Jr. projects better for us, and I understand why he does. But like Juwan Johnson at 3,600 is right fucking there, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
how
so
do
of all the fragile chalk, I think that's the most fragile chalk. Like I think Fannin is easily the most fragile chalk. And I don't mind eating it if like the rest of my lineup is already a little bit contrarian. I don't think it's crazy, but I think I don't feel bad at all getting off of it. You just have to get over this thing of what his projection looks like. And remember, you're using a 1 week sample to use it to create that projection.
Also, Travis Kelce is 5K.
I know it's such a loose price slate. So we should wrap it up. Are there any other questions we didn't get to? And then we can share some parting thoughts. I do think I feel good about the fact that we've taken a slate that feels really big and is really loosely priced and given some concepts around how we can attack it in a way that gives us a chance to win. I at least feel better if nobody else does. So, that's what matters here.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is why we do this talk through, is because you can look at things we can look at things objectively, and we can say, here are games that, why are people not focusing on these games? Here are players that, why are people not focusing on these players? Or here's the reasons why they are focusing on X, Y, or Z and not this player. Like I can't explain why people aren't playing AJ Brown at 6,600 outside of like having blinders on, right? That's one of the things where hopefully when we flip the cards, he's not fucking 19% owned, which has happened before because everyone said the same thing, right? So we'll see how that works when I add sentiment stuff tomorrow morning. But I think this slate, again, like I said about half an hour ago, this is a slate that breaks my bankroll, right? Because I look at it and I'm like, how on earth are people not seeing this slate the same way that I am? And granted, those are the slates where you can lose your ass, right? Those are the slates where you're just like, all right, well,
yeah. Just hedge. You're playing 5 lineups. Okay, play 3 Mac Jones and have 1 Lamar, have 1 Josh.
Well, this is kind of one of the reasons why I have enjoyed MMEing recently and using the portfolio manager, is that I do end up in the way that I play having natural hedges and having different lineups that have different, finishing percentile expectations and different like levels of ownership and weighted ownership and stuff like that, because it prevents me. Like what I want to do is look at the slate and say, okay, I want a fuck ton of Mac Jones. I want a lot of Philadelphia, Kansas City. I want a lot of Cincinnati, Jacksonville. But in those macro things, I don't really care what happens in between all of those things. Like, give me ownership, lower my volatility a bit. I don't need a whole bunch of volatility outside of the macro things that I want to attempt to have. It's much harder with 3 max and 5 max stuff, right? Because like you have to be like, here's my Kansas City, Philadelphia. Here's my Cincinnati, Jacksonville. Here's my whatever the fuck, right? Like my third lineup. Yeah. But like you have to be very cautious and very careful of the things that you do within those lineups, because you can't just kind of let variance take the wheel. So
let's each take one play that is not it doesn't have to be like completely off the radar, but I'm going to say it can't be quarterback. Okay. So one flex play. And this is our first, I know we had, Hess on last week and so it's not the first slate talk, the first one I've been on. We can change this as we want as we go to future weeks, but let's pick one skill position, wide receiver, running back, tight end, that isn't terribly owned, that you feel very strongly about being a great play. Do you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
You go ahead and go first. I think you have people in mind.
I got one guy in mind, and he's. I don't know that I believe he's going to be this low owned, but I just think it's such an obvious fucking play that I cannot believe he's not owned. BTJ, like he's priced in a way that is keeping people off of him because he's in between the studs. He's in between. Jamar Chase and Puka, and then then the cheap guys that everyone wants, like Hollywood Brown and Calvin Ridley and Olave. I think that game has a really good chance of going off. I really love the approach where you play Mac Jones with 2 of the pass catchers on Cincy instead of Burrow, and you bring it back with BTJ. I think BTJ, I don't think anybody in the Bengals can cover him. I think the Bengals defense is shit. I think the Bengals are gonna have to score like 30 points every game to win this year.
Yeah.
And I think I also think BTJ is like a top, 5 receiver in this league within the next year or so. So that's my play, and hopefully he proves me right.
I like that. I was heavy on Brian Thomas Jr. last week, and that was not great. But I like the play again this week. My play that I think is probably one of the best plays on the slate is going to be Derrick Henry. Any slate really where people are putting a lot of focus on Lamar Jackson, you get kind of an outsized return if Derrick Henry ends up crushing. And Baltimore are like 12-point favorites at home against a bad team that, they should mostly boat race. We just saw Derrick Henry eviscerate the Buffalo Bills. Like he looks incredible coming out of the gates. So he's expensive. He's 8,200. I think he's the most expensive flex player on the slate, but you get outsized returns in terms of the leverage that you get on him, the relative value. He's not going to be super highly owned. And you can afford him because as Jason just said, like you can literally go with Mac Jones, CMC, and Derrick Henry and like be fine. What you could do, hi baby.
Did you see that shit?
See what shit?
The way that he just shut the door.
Oh, that was so fucking funny. Yeah, that was hilarious.
He's got nerve.
He does have nerve. Takes after his mother. So like I just think that he's such a good play this week. So Derrick Henry is somebody that I have a lot of interest in. Something that you can do. Build a lineup that has Lamar Jackson at quarterback. And then simply do a 2v2 swap. Lamar Jackson down to Mac Jones, 42 up to Derrick Henry. That's all you got to do, right? Like that's all you got to do. So I think he's a really, really, really strong play tomorrow.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions unless people got something I didn't see.
No, I mean I think that like that we have Trey Benson. Remember this for tomorrow. I'd fucking tip my hat to you if he ends up crushing it. This is good. This is a good note on the Harold Fannin thing. They get Judy, Sampson, Judkins. Like they have a lot of people who are going to be playing. Tyquan Thornton slander is absurd. Well, fucking if you would like, look, it's fine. Like if you want to play Tyquan, go for it. I don't care. Focus on that game. But like, whatever. Here's a new question. Thoughts on Drake May? I think Drake May is fine. From just like from a process standpoint, I'm totally fine with playing Drake May. I don't know that I will be doing that. It's fine, but I don't have a problem with him in theory. He's kind of similar to the play of Mac Jones and like the other cheap quarterbacks. Like he's kind of like a Spencer Rattler, which by the way, New Orleans stack is free. There's not a single player in the stack over 5K, by the way. So if you really wanted to go fucking cheap and bargain bin, you could go with Spencer Rattler with New Orleans stack. But yeah, I think he's fine. I think that, you replace Drake May with X, Y, or Z cheap quarterback, and that's what you're looking at. You're not necessarily doing it because you think Drake May is going to be the highest scoring quarterback on the slate. You do it because he's cheap and he allows you to upgrade your RB2 to an RB1. And it just makes sense to GPP. So I think I'm fine with it. I know that you don't like Drake May, so we can.
No, I think it's fine. I think it's fine. I think that people are a little too high in him, and I think people are bearing Miami a little prematurely. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Large field under on CMC. I mean, probably not. He's going to be. I don't know. He's going to be 25 to 30% owned when I rerun ownership sentiment tomorrow. He's going to come up. He might be like 35% owned. I'm fine with 30 to 35% of it. I'll match the field. He's not the player that I think that like I want to be outsized over on. It's a good price. Maybe you want 40 or so % in MME, but like I wouldn't have him in all three of my three max lineups. Pablo, you probably do 2 out of 3. I'm gonna guess. CMC,
yeah, I might just go 3 out of 3 for small field. I don't know that I feel like it's worth getting off of him it kind of depends on my roster builds. I mean, I'm more willing to get off of him if I'm not paying down a quarterback.
Yeah. So in small field, like, it's probably, 60, 70% or whatever, like that's probably fine. And in large field, like 30 to 40, whatever. That's, I'm not, I kind of, it's in a weird way. It's kind of, Christian McCaffrey doesn't actually matter on the slate tomorrow in a weird way. Like, if you want to play him, that's awesome. He's a great play. If you don't want to play him, that's awesome. You could also play, any combination of the really expensive guys, and they all make sense. Like, because of the way that the pricing works out on the slate, you can kind of do whatever you'd like to do. So I think that it's less about like, oh, I want to get off of Christian McCaffrey. It's more like, I'm going to have Christian McCaffrey in lineups where I can eat all that ownership and I don't care. And then in lineups where I don't want to have all the ownership of Christian McCaffrey, I'm just not going to, I'll find, I'll play Derrick Henry or whatever. Right. So I think it's fine. One more question here and then we'll get out of here. If you're playing Burrow, would you play Chase Brown also? No-ish. I don't know. We'll see.
I think it's fine. I think you can if you want.
Yeah.
Chase Brown catches more passes than people realize. I wouldn't make a rule like you have to play Burrow with Chase Brown. I'm fine playing Chase Brown with or without Burrow. I mean, I like Chase Brown more than I like Burrow just because of because of the price.
I am more inclined to play Chase Brown with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and do a 3-man stack that way and replace Joe Burrow with Chase Brown, if that makes sense. They're both basically the same price. And I think that I'm more inclined to do it that way if I want a Cincinnati stack than a Joe Burrow plus T. Higgins plus Jamar Chase. So, anyway, that's going to be it. It's been a really good one. Mike just put a comment that says JETS, Jets. Sure, fine, whatever. I think that Justin Fields has been unrightfully crucified. I think that he's been fine for about 2 years now, and I think that he'll be fine with the Jets. So if you want to play the Jets, totally fine with that. If you have not checked out Paydirt yet, do it. I'm putting the portfolio manager behind the paywall tonight. So if you've been using it for free, thanks for the testing. I appreciate it. It's now pretty much ready to go behind the wall. If you have not gotten a subscription, you should. It's $40 a month for access to the entire site, $35 for just NFL. There's also NFL All Access yearly and NFL only yearly. There's also weekly and daily subscriptions. You don't get that at very many other places. So And the other part of this is that you get access to a community that's really, really strong. So yeah,
for whoever asked before, like first time playing or whatever, like get in the Discord. It is a uniquely supportive community. Like it is a place where people talk about game theory, people just shoot the shit. It really feels like an organic, friendly place where you can learn how to play. Whether you've been playing a long time and you want advanced players to think through advanced topics, or whether you want to just shoot the shit with people and kind of just get the basics down. So I'll brag because you don't do it enough, but this is, I think, bar none, easily the best value in the industry is Paydirt. Like nobody's close to Paydirt in terms of value.
Yeah. I'm trying to be better about bragging and arguing about it on Twitter with Show My Money when he says dumb shit. Like, there's not better values. Also, a unique part of the Discord is that there's a Talk Your Shit and Move On channel where you can literally just fucking be internet warriors of each other and then move on. So that's a nice little perk. So anyway, check out Paydirt. If you liked what you heard, saw, whatever here, we appreciate all the support. Hopefully I can hang on to the Millie tomorrow. I was in second place with like 3 minutes to play yesterday or last week. So hopefully I can fucking not fall to 33rd this time, getting passed by Fear My Fucking Tuttle and shit like that. It'll be a good week. Thank you guys for tuning in. We appreciate you. We love you. And hopefully we can bring some trophies home tomorrow. Adios. Peace.